It is 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, May 12th, 2022. I want to say to you, let's get ready to Talking Shhh I.T with Glenn and Tony. And away they go. Have a great show, you two.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, Glenn.
How you doing, man?
It's 8 o'clock. Do you know where your instruments are?
I hope so. Hope they are all present and accounted for, because otherwise somebody got some splaining to do. Let me get this going over here. My virtual camera was not on yet, so that wasn't doing it. But if we do that, ta-da! There I am.
Hey. Oh, the beard's coming in nice.
Beard,
I'm
yeah.
liking it.
I'll fix the lights in a second where it's not quite so blinding with the bright white beard. We'll figure that out in a minute.
Well, you're getting like the Clooney.
A little bit. It should be darker all around in like this area here, and then it wouldn't be so bad, but it's like the whole chin is just so white. And of course all this. And the white grows faster, so it all pokes through.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn from Jason. I
Exactly.
take from the Jason book of beard growing.
That's definitely a good book to start with. Now, for this week, I figured in the early part of the show, we would do a couple of the videos that I had thought about for last week or had gotten together. A couple of them. Let me see what the titles that we have going for us today are. We've got, let's see, we'll start probably with this one, the five bass lines that'll teach you groove. This is one where it basically gets into 5 different songs that are really good songs to start with if you're into bass, or just even for anybody who's a musician, they explain a little bit more about it. Whether you're a bassist or whether you're just someone who wants to be better at music, this is a good choice because these bass lines will teach you how to groove and will help you understand what the bass is trying to accomplish in most songs that you have a bass line, because there is something that the bass is trying to do, whether it's trying to hold down the groove or whether it's trying to jump out and stand out in certain areas and just hold everything together otherwise. But just certain things will really hold that stuff together.
And it's good to think about what a groove really is. What makes a groove? It's a lot like, what makes a hook, what makes good words in a song. A groove is a very important element in a song. Some bands are groove bands, Dead
Absolutely.
Fish, they are all groove.
Some of my favorites. And there's some that, you wouldn't necessarily consider a groove band that still can groove when they want to, or still have certain songs that really just pack it.
Yeah,
pack
they
that groove in
inject the
there.
grooves.
Exactly. And a lot of times that is the responsibility of the bass player. I mean, it's not always his job. Sometimes a guitar part can really groove for you, or a keyboard part can really set that up for you, or a drummer, of course. But a lot of times it's the bass that kind of sets that up, whether it's the bass doing something simple and the rest of the groove falling around it, or whether it's being driven really by the bass. And I think these are mostly for, songs that'll help teach the drive in that bass.
Yeah, so I think the bassist is really the groove manager, along with the drummer. The two of them, they're kind of like both groove supervisors.
Yep, you get that rhythm section going along nice, and just everybody else can just ride along. If you're a soloist, that's what you want to see. Is you want to see that whole Jeep essentially just going on its own. They got the driver, you got the passenger, you got everybody doing their thing, but they're setting up that whole thing for the soloist, whether it's a vocalist or an instrumentalist, to just come in and just ride right on top of that. Really nice when it all works out that way.
So it's fun for a soloist who has a good groove accompaniment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, let me know if the volume comes okay here. We should be good, but let's try that out. This is from Rhett Scholl's page. We've looked at a couple of his things before. This is at about 30%, so we'll see how that does for volume.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Rhett.
I'm Philip.
So today we're doing something a little bit different. We're talking about 5 bass lines that we think everyone needs to know, whether you're a bass player, guitar player. All these bass lines have something in common. They're going to teach you fundamentals when it comes to groove and feel and playing in the pocket.
And these aren't the most famous or the most complicated bass lines. These are bass lines that are just really cleverly, thoughtfully made and will help you be a more well-rounded musician if you take the time to learn them. So I think they're really cool. We're just going to talk about what makes them cool.
Yeah, so I started playing bass as a guitar player about 7 years ago, and immediately when I started playing bass, it made me a better guitar player. It changed my perspective on how I listen to music, how I play with a band. It made me focus a lot more on being part of the rhythm section, what the drums and the bass guitar are doing, and I think that's something that all these bass lines will do for you. as a guitar player or another instrumentalist who might be picking up bass for the first time. So we're gonna take a look at these 5 bass lines. Before we do though, go subscribe to Phil's channel linked down below, Philip Conrad on YouTube. He's also got a brand new bass course available, which I'll have linked down there below. And if you wanna support this channel, you can check out my new video course, Fretboard Fundamentals, Chords, and Rhythm. With that out of the way, let's take a look at our first bass line.
I Wish is a monster bass line. It just feels so good with the music. It plays so nicely with the drums. It complements the chords so well. And it's fun to play. It's this steady 8th note groove that just is the perfect part. It's just so fun to play, and the notes are short and punchy. I think that's something about bass playing that's really important, is knowing how long to let a note breathe or ring out. It can make the music feel totally different depending on how long your notes are.
And it interlocks with the drums really well. Like if we listen just... Like the kick drum is good, giving that driving 8th note pattern, but it's that interaction between the bass line and the kick drum that's really driving the whole groove of that song.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the note choice is great and brilliant on its own, but I think something that really sets this one apart is how he plays it, how it's sitting, how they are sitting as a rhythm section. It just feels great, and anytime I hear that bass line, you can't help but tap your foot and want to dance. It's a great one.
This is probably one of, if not my favorite John Mayer songs of all time. And it's all because Pino Palladino and Steve Jordan.
Yeah, they're like master architects of making a song feel good.
Yeah. So what's going on here?
Well, I mean, I think one of my favorite parts of that song is just that verse intro groove, that part that we heard. I mean, the chorus is great too, obviously, but that... Not that complicated, but the way it interlocks with the drums and also the guitar part, those parts all play so nicely together. It's like pieces of a puzzle fitting together, and it creates this sort of hypnotic, great feeling as an intro and a verse of the song.
And the drum groove is so simple on this. It's like the most simple straight ahead part that Steve Jordan could have played. And if it was any more complicated, if there was any more like kick fill or anything else other than that boom, got going on, it wouldn't groove as hard as it does.
Something you can learn from this is sometimes the perfect bass line isn't necessarily the most impressive or flashy thing. It might just be a thoughtful, simple line that just ties everything together in a creative way.
How do I stop myself from being just a number? How will I hold
It's almost like a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Right? It's those pauses. It makes the chorus feel awesome
Yeah.
when the chorus comes in.
if this is what it takes?
It's a variation of the same rhythm on the chorus.
Then I'll come
But it's still very simple.
like I do when the world keeps testing me, testing me, testing me.
And all of Pino's bass fills, if you can even call them that, are super simple. Like there's no flashy
Yeah.
licks going on. It's just octaves mostly.
Yeah, and just these little sneaky, slidey sort of moments, they tie the song together so nicely.
Mother, mother, there's too many of you to cry. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you die.
This song, I had to learn this song in school. Actually, when Rhett and I went to school together about 10 years ago. When I had to learn this bass line, I feel like more than any other bass line, this one had an impact on and an influence on me as a bass player. Because I feel like it's a masterpiece. The whole thing's a masterpiece. And you can dig as deep as you want to. James Jamerson just weaves this brilliant, thoughtful 16th note line through these chords in a masterful way. You can learn a lot about timing, 16th note variations, chord tones. It's great. It's so great. I mean, this line. It's so fun to play, and I think the more that you play it and the more you start to notice the little details, you can learn a lot about music from learning this song. And a cool thing too about it is I just did the chromatic run at the end that's actually not in the Marvin Gaye version. There's another version, the Donny Hathaway version of the same song.
The Donny Hathaway live version, which had Willie Weeks on bass.
So another great bass player playing the same song in a different way. Let's check out the way Willie Weeks is playing it. It's a little bouncier.
Right.
A lot more of these syncopations and hits. It's got a little more. Yeah, I love the way Willie Weeks plays it as well, and it's an example of two great bass players playing the same song in a different way. Willie Weeks is a little more. So anyway, I think this line is one that if you take the time to dig into this, I promise you won't regret it. You're going to learn about music. You're going to learn about how chords work together. You're going to learn about how you can use your note duration and your note choice to make the music feel different or feel better.
We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sail into the mystic.
All right, so this one's a little bit out of left field. I don't know that Van Morrison is on many people's like top bass line lists, but this one I think is a perfect one for people to learn, a perfect one to teach you about groove, because to me what I'm hearing is the bass and the kick interlocking super well. The bass is actually the most complicated and the most has the most movement of anything in the whole arrangement.
The song is not complicated. The guitar is just kind of floaty. The drums are just kind of like the ride cymbals just floating along. But this is an example of a bass line, I think, grounding a song and tying it together. And also something really cool about this song is the bass line is actually assisting the songwriter in telling the story. Right? So Van Morrison is a great songwriter, and I think all of us as musicians, I think we should approach the parts that we write and the parts that we play like songwriters, right? If you're working with a songwriter, someone wrote a song, you want to try and come up with a part that's gonna make that song feel the way they wanted the song to feel when they wrote it, right? So it's kind of got this like cool, hypnotic, nostalgic, open feeling to it, and the bass line helps complete that feeling in a cool way. I mean, all that is just the root of the chord, and then we're just playing the 5 and the 6 and kind of bouncing back and forth. But when you listen to that song, it's hard not to love it.
Yeah.
It's just a great song. And I think the bass line has a big part of why that song feels so good.
For me, I think this is a really good bass line for people who are new to bass to learn, because it has some movements that are really common that you run into a lot.
Yeah, that root 5 and going between the 5 and the 6, those sort of chord tones and those sort of rhythms. These are not unusual bass patterns, but the way it's executed on this song, it's just super cool. It'd be an easy one to pick up, and it's one that makes the music feel really good.
Yeah.
Switch to Verizon Fios, the 100% fiber optic network built for streaming.
Our household is always streaming at any given.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, and then then I watch them roll away again. Yeah.
For me, this is one of those bass lines you could mute every other track in the song, and I could just hear that bass line and immediately know what it is.
It's super distinctive, and that intro, it's just 2 notes. I mean, that just feels great, and it's cool too because it's not 1/5. He's kind of bending into it, and this. It just has a great feel to it, and the second you hear that, you know the song's about to begin. And I played that song a bunch of times at different wedding gigs and things like that. And when you start that bass line, before the rest of the band comes in, everybody is already smiling and ready to have a good time because everybody loves that song. And the verse is great too. There's some different note durations. Some of these notes are held out and some of them are punchier, and they're kind of locking with that soul feel with the drums. This is a cool song because it's a folk song with a soul band playing it.
Yeah, it really is one of the best bass lines. And this one, like the Van Morrison song Into the Mystic, I think is another really good one for relatively new bass players to learn. This is one of the first ones I learned because coming from guitar, my main goal with playing bass was I didn't want to sound like a guitar player playing bass. Like it's usually pretty easy to spot. And I think this song, and actually every song on this list we've talked about, will give you some really core fundamentals when it comes to bass playing that will help differentiate you from your main instrument if you're coming from a main instrument like I am and like many people watching this channel are.
Try and get the little details and the nuances of the note duration and the little sort of in-between moments.
Yeah.
And trying to really lock with the drummer. And I think these songs are songs that if you take the time to do that, you're going to start to think and feel like a bass player. And it's going to start to tie some things together for you.
So there you go. Those are 5 bass lines that everyone should know. Huge thanks to my friend Philip Conrad for coming on and showing us some of his favorite bass lines. I will have his channel linked down below, as well as his bass course, his bass video course. If you are new to bass playing, worth checking out, right?
I feel good about it.
And also check.
So definitely some good ideas there for bass lines and what they can teach you, what learning these bass lines can show you about some groove and learning how songs get put together. And so it can help you with both songwriting and just playing in general.
Yeah, those were 5 great picks. I know
Absolutely.
3 of them.
Yep. I think
Only 2 more.
I'm pretty sure I've played all of them, but that's one of those things where I can never be too sure because there are times where I'm halfway through a song. Like I could be at an open jam and I'm playing with somebody different and we're halfway through a song and the drummer leans over and he's like, "What song is this?" And I lean over and I'm like, "I have no idea." And he gives me a double take because we're halfway done playing it. And he's like, "But you're playing it." I'm like, "I know, but it doesn't
Well,
mean I know what song it is."
the Van Morrison one was a surprise to me. That was an unusual pick, but they were right. Like, it does have that. It does have groove,
Absolutely.
and it's different, for Van Morrison.
It is.
And they made that point early on about like what you were saying, how the bass and the drums kind of are the important start of a groove, and then how the keys and the guitars bounce off of that syncopated bass and drums begins to create that groove that makes you feel like you're left, right, kind of feel.
Gets you actually moving, gets your feet tapping, all that kind of stuff. And it all depends on the groove. Like you said, certain ones just kind of magically do that. There's certain patterns even. One was that clave pattern that we talked about. Like there's more of a complex pattern, but like they like it's got that high, something on the hi-hat just going back and forth. But it's just that certain thing that really gets you, catches your ear, gets your toe tapping, gets you wanting to hear more of what's going on.
A good groove will either have an active hi-hat or like a ride that just kind of taps you along, gives you a secondary metronome.
Yep. And one of the other things he mentioned in there was if in one of the 5 songs was if the drummer had added anything more, it wouldn't have grooved as hard because he kept it a little bit simple. Like he kept just enough to keep the bass going, to keep everything else kind of glued together, but not so much that it's trying to take over the song and all that. And that's where, again, musicians that are good at either working together or blending together or, having their parts blend together so that, if there is a soloist or what have you, it can ride on top and everybody else can kind of back down and be back here. And then when it's time to build it up, they can all build up together. And then the crowd knows when to jump in and,
Oh,
cheer
and
them on
that's
up.
when you know a band is grooving good together.
Mhm.
When you feel that shift across all of them as they change like that.
And it's changing in dynamics is a lot of times what that does. Cause like as somebody's, you're coming to the last few bars of a solo, if you're trying to build it up, you're making it louder. People started a little bit quieter just before then. You have to make it quieter to go louder. Otherwise you're just going over the top. You can't start at 100% and then where you're going to go. It's like
Yeah.
you're breaking your amp or you're breaking people's ears at that point. So that's where it's good to have your bass line set at, let's say 80%. So you can come back to 60% and build up to 100 and come back to 80. You can
Yeah.
play around a little bit better with the dynamics in that way and build up the either excitement or suspense or whatever it is that you're going for in the song.
Yeah. And they kind of emphasize like, grooves don't have to be complex. Like the simplicity of a groove is actually what makes a groove so special.
Mhm.
Kiefer was saying like, getting into the pocket, we
Yep.
talk about this all the time. Like your skill is you can jump into a pocket in like one measure.
Yep.
And the better you are at grooving, the faster the band comes together.
Mhm.
It's
And
good
that's where
because you're a bassist. Like you
Mhm.
have to be quick on your feet there.
Yep. We actually played 3 songs at the open jam the other night, and it was a drummer that we hadn't played with before at the jam. But it was just 3 of us from our usual band. So it was me and Joey and Cheryl, and that's the bass, the guitar, and the vocals. And we joined a drummer. And so like for any of the songs that we had picked, it was just like, I'll just show me how how you want it to groove. So like the guitar player would just kind of give him a little chunk to give him the speed, and boom cha, give him that kind of idea. Start with that and see how it feels from there, and then just kind of built right into it.
Yeah, and don't you love when you got a drummer who can just kind of sit down, you never played with them before, and the really good ones can just
Mhm.
feel off of a guitar riff or a bass riff, and next thing you know, it's like you guys have been playing together for years.
Yep, and because he recognized the songs also, we weren't just pulling songs out of left field. There were songs that were familiar enough to him that, he might not have known exactly how to play it, but he's definitely heard it before, and he definitely knows how the groove goes. So once you get him into the right speed and kind of the right feel, he can hear it coming around, and like he's hitting the right accent hits and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it worked out really well in that regard.
Yeah,
But a lot of times,
if you're lucky enough to get like a good trained jazz drummer,
Mhm.
or the really like advanced blues drummers and things like that, these are the guys that can sit down and just start jamming with anybody.
Yep. And this guy was Brian. He's at the Greek over there, and it was he's one of those guys that went back and forth. Like he played drums for us, and then he was playing a couple of songs on an acoustic guitar a few minutes later. So he's back and forth between a couple different things. And I think he was playing
Oh,
Pink Floyd, and he had somebody singing for him while he was playing some Pink Floyd on the acoustic. I'm like, I like this guy.
he's got a little Jeff Beck in him.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, going back
Yeah.
and forth between everything. Sure. But the place is like an hour away, so it's a bit of a hike to go to a jam and just play 3-4 songs. But it's one of those things where it's good to get on stage and do a couple things, and have a couple beers, support the other people who are coming out. Some people are brand new at this, and this is like they're super nervous and this is their first time getting on stage, and other people have been playing together for years, and it's fun to see it all come together.
Yeah,
All the
and an
different
open
varied
mic is
levels.
open mics in situations like that are a great way to get more comfortable with playing on stage.
Yep.
It's better than like your first gig and all of a sudden you got to go with your band and go on stage and play a whole set.
Mhm.
If you're not comfortable as a performer on stage,
Mhm.
those open mics are a good way to warm yourself up to that.
They are really a great way to, and it's the kind of thing where some people they'd say, "Oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. I could never, I'm terrible at public speaking. I don't like getting up in front of people." And it's just if you just get there, and even if you just focus on your instrument, I mean, you don't have to be up there, being the show person of the year. It's an open mic. You're getting over the I can't do that. You got to get over that step before you can ever
Yeah.
do it. But you do it
I'm
once,
always worried about messing up
yeah,
because
and
I'm
messing up
not a
happens.
precision player, so
Mhm.
I'm not so concerned about the public there. I'm always worried I'm going to hit the wrong notes or
Mhm.
totally brain fart. Like, what was I just playing?
Mhm. And these things happen. I mean, it's it happens where you're playing the wrong thing, or you missed a change, or you got distracted by something in the room and you weren't expecting it. And that's another reason why it's great to do these, because a lot of times if you are on stage, something will happen in the bar. Somebody drops a tray in the back corner, and you're in the middle of doing something. All of a sudden, in the back, it had nothing to do with you,
That's
but it
not a
can
drum cymbal.
but it can definitely throw you off. And you're like, does somebody need help? And then he's like, oh, where were we? And all of a sudden you've missed, 3 beats, and you can't find your way back into the song.
No, it's the same way as if you have a bandmate, like, who messes up a part or a note. And if you've really trained yourself, you move on.
Yes.
You don't
Key.
stop when
Very
somebody
important.
messes up.
Very important. The key is
Otherwise,
you
they'll
gotta
look
get
at
back on
you.
the beat. Yeah, you got to get back on the beat. Otherwise, the whole thing can train wreck. And that's where, you know, even if everybody messed up and only one person managed to hold it together, if that one person held it together, okay, that was their solo time. You know, like if the drummer managed to hang on while everybody else kind of fell off, if everybody can jump back in at least, you know, that's where get up on the one. You know, if you can get up on that one, even if you're not sure exactly what's going on, but if you can feel that you're coming back around. Okay, here it comes back around. And that's another way that the drummer can help. Or if it's building up a little bit, or a little bit of a like something different right at the end of the phrase, so that you know you're coming back around.
That's the way drummers save a lot of bands sometimes. When the other guys are messing up, the drummer sometimes is the saving grace at keeping people on track. And it only sucks if the drummer's the one messing up. If everybody else is playing good and the drummer messes up, oh, that can be
well, if the drummer messes up and the bass player and the guitar player are paying attention, like if it was me and I'm playing something that's like a simple kind of whatever line, if the drummer just kind of drops out, I'm going to start into I'm going to start into like a much busier line, even if I'm just thumping on one note.
You start substituting for the drum.
Exactly. I'll start filling in those hits because the drive still needs to be there, you know. And if he's not, you know, he drops his stick. That happens sometimes, like, you know,
and sometimes that helps.
And they drop the stick out.
That'll help a drummer get back into their pocket if somebody does that for them.
Yep.
Otherwise, they just got to figure out where they are.
And even if it sounds like the same thing the whole time, so where does he come back in? You have to kind of give him, you know, and like you give him that, you know, the bounce in, so he sees it coming, and that helps too sometimes. But again, it's one of those things where when I'm playing with Joey and Cheryl, a lot of times we do just kind of start into songs where they may have discussed it to see what song they're doing, so that he knows that she's ready with the words and he's ready with the guitar part, and they just start. And I recognize either what they're playing or find what key they're in and just get there, and we just start the song. But sometimes we do talk about it first. In this case, my buddy Mike was possibly going to come play drums for us. I had to check to see if he was free, and he wasn't free that night. But if he was going to come, I told Joey I wanted to know what songs we were doing so I could let him know, so he could at least listen to a couple songs and be ready, because he hasn't really played with us out at a gig like that doing drums. So I figured give him as much notice as I can, you know, like, let's work on these 3 songs or whatever, and we can go play those out.
Yeah, it's nice
for a start.
I don't know how you guys sometimes play songs where you haven't had a chance to practice them as a band, because me, I'm old school. Like every song I ever played in a performance, I practiced. I had to, because keyboard parts take practice.
They do. And that's where same thing with Joey and the solos, because he's the lead guitar player. So he's got to be able to play the rhythm if he's the only guitar on stage, and he has to be able to fill in those leads. And those leads have very specific riffs to them. Sometimes it's, you know, it has to be this exact solo. Sometimes it has to be kind of in this
otherwise
style.
It's not that song.
Yeah.
Like you can play the chords, but if you don't have that solo in there, it's not that song.
Yep. But also so much of it comes down to the tone. And that's where with Joey, he doesn't use any pedals. He's got beautiful guitars, beautiful amps, but everything is in the fingers and in the attack, and, you know, the way he attacks with the pick and everything else. Like that's where all the tone comes from. So any song you've ever heard, like if somebody says, "Oh yeah, you need this pedal and this pedal and this pedal to get that tone," it's like he gets it all with just using the guitars and the amps and just the way he dials things in. And okay, you know, for this song, you know, you just watch him just make little adjustments back here. Like, okay, it's going to be on, you know, move to this pickup and dial it back here, and then boom, just dig in, and you get those sounds, whether it's the squeals or the pick harmonics, like all kinds of stuff like that. And that's the kind of stuff that I really pay attention to. Like I'm watching him and I'm like, you know, seeing those kinds of things to try to add them to the
It's much easier to jam to a guitarist who takes that approach. You know, a nice clean guitar without too much distortion. The more they add tones like that, the harder it is for others to play to those tones. A nice clean tone is easy to follow.
Sometimes it's a signature tone. Like, you know, if you're playing an AC/DC song, there's a certain tone you want to get. You're playing a Van Halen song, there's a certain tone you want to get. And with those, again, he manages it with just the guitar and the amps. He can get those sounds. And in a lot of cases, it's because, you know, if he's trying to sound like Angus, he's got the SG there, like an old, you know, 70s, 80s, like an old SG, and he's got a Les Paul, and he's got a Charvel.
Yeah, and you know, with like AC/DC, you know, the tone at the beginning, like when he's coming in versus his power chord tones, you know, during the courses and things, it's not a complicated tone to simulate.
Right. And that's where a lot of times, like the Floor Pod Plus, the pedal that I have, the multi-pedal, has all those tones in there. It's instead of AC/DC, it's DC/AC, or instead of
Well, yeah, I think it's a rule. I think it's a rule. Every guitar tone that has come out since the 80s has to have something AC/DC like.
Yep. And it's got, you know, 80, 100, whatever tones to choose from, but each one is a preset that'll get you in the ballpark of those sounds, but they don't sound perfect. And I wouldn't necessarily use it on stage unless it was something like an open jam or what have you. But for recording, it's great. For practicing, it's great. And generally, I don't even use a pedal. I'll just plug in direct and just use the guitar and, just plug in and listen to it like that. But that doesn't get me experience with the things I was talking about, like feeling the amp, feeling the interaction between the guitar and the amp while you're playing live on stage at volume. That's the key that I need to work on. So when I'm in the studio, that's one of the things that I like to do. If I'm on guitar, it's like one of the first things I want to do is get some volume and start, leaning in with some song and do some solo stuff and go back and forth.
Yeah, the studio's tricky like that. Like there, you're feeling the music, usually in your headphones, whereas on stage, it's true. Like you feel it like in your chest as the sound comes out of an amp.
Actually, in this case, I'm thinking the studio down by Joey's house, where I'm actually usually across the room from the bass amp. So I'm playing bass right next to the drum kit. So the drummer and I are kind of back over in this side of the circle. And then on the far opposite side of the circle is the keyboard player and Joey, the guitar player. And our amps are over there. So my bass amp is on the other side.
Yeah,
of the room.
you have their sound coming at you.
So I have all the sound mixing together by the time it gets to me. And that's
that's a nice feeling
when
when you can feel the music as you're playing it like that.
Yep. And since I'm sitting right next to the drummer, like I have the most immediate access to the, when the one is, I have to hear right when that happens. So I have to be right next to him for that. And actually with my bass amp all the way across the room, he probably hears me just a little bit late.
Does the drummer use headphones when he plays?
He can, but actually instead of headphones, he actually has monitors behind him. So like he is actually hearing me at speed. Like he's hearing my bass signal, not through my amp, but coming through the board to his monitors behind him.
Now when you guys are recording, you don't use those monitors, right?
We try not to, or at least the recording of the drums themselves.
They would bleed into the drums.
They would, but the drum mics, like if here's the drum head, like here, the mic is literally like this. So it's, an inch, let's say, off the drum head. So even if there is some bleed through, the volume of a drum going smack, like
and
it's
the mic is so
directional.
Much
louder. The mics basically like sit, and whether they're hooked on like this or whether it's a full mic that's just pointing down at the drum head. Sometimes they're a little bit angled in from the side, but like I like to have them essentially pointing down because again, you're not straight down, but at an angle. You're trying to listen to the drum head, but the whole drum head, because sometimes they're hitting that side or this side or a rim shot. You need to be available for all those sounds that they could get.
Oh, I'm sure when you were like miking those drums, you moved them, listen until.
Part of the big one also is where the drummer, like watch him play, like just play around, like tell him to play around the kid a little bit and make sure they do a bunch of rolls and stuff and make sure that none of the mics are in the way, because if they're coming across and they go clack and they hit one of those mics,
if you don't see how they play, you're going to put a mic in their way.
Exactly. And that's where, especially like for the hi-hat, if you're going to do anything on the hi-hat or the crashes, or if you're going to have some overheads for the stuff going off on, going on up top, it's important to not be in their way. And that's, you don't want to affect their playing. It's like, I want to mic you up as best I can, but I don't want to affect your playing. So I want to work around what you need, so like you need to move through here. I don't want to be in the way in there.
Miking a drum is so fun of a challenge, but at the same time, it's a challenge. I spent a decade just on that science.
Yeah. And then there's also, ringing the drums in and all of that, which I've never had to be involved with just because I'm not the drummer. So for me, it's like, if I'm doing anything with the drums, it's me just assisting Mike with getting them all mic'd up. And in most cases, Mike is actually doing all the mounting of the drum onto the, mounting of the mics onto the drum hardware, because it's his mic kit, which has all the custom little clamps to get on there, but it's also the drummer's kit. And so it has to, you have to work with them. Some people don't want anyone touching their stuff. So it might be, I could just,
I like when there's a drummer who, is conscientious of their own mic placements, because I've dealt with both. I've had drummers who are just kind of like, do whatever you want with the mics, I don't care. And my favorite ones are the ones who actually have their own strategy on the mics, because they understand their drums, they understand what they're trying to get out of the drums. And if they understand how the mics work and what we're trying to capture, they're a big help.
Yeah. And that's where it is. It comes down to the placement. It comes down to working with the drummer. It comes down to not being in his way so that he can do his thing and not think about us. Like he should just be able to do his thing, and everybody should be able to hear all the pieces of the kit. So if he's doing a pattern up on the bell over here that people need to hear for the timing of the song, it's important that they're able to hear it, all that stuff. And again, drums, it's usually pretty easy in terms of, they're loud acoustically, in the room. Like if you're sitting on stage, you're going to hear the drums. Like you're not, there's no isolation that's going to keep you from hearing what's going on with the drums. But sometimes people do play too loud into their guitar amps or what have you, where they're overpowering the stage. And that way it can be difficult for
that's
somebody
the
on the
big
opposite
problem
side.
with live performances. More live recordings than not, when I'm listening to them, the drums get lost because everything else is in front of them, and usually the person recording is in front of the stage and the drums are in the back,
Yep.
and you can hear it in the recording.
And that's where the live sound reinforcement that Mike and I do is, we bring the PA with the big mains and the subwoofers, and we are taking full signal from all the drums and from all the instruments and blending it all so that what he's pushing out front should be everything, so that you're getting that full presence of the drums. When you hear him, you should be hearing and feeling
and
that
you
last
want
drum.
it you want it to feel like it's actually moving in space.
Yep. And you can accomplish that as well just by using the pan controls on the board itself. You can say you want, the high rack tom on, a little bit off to the left, and the mid rack tom kind of center, and the low tom kind of off to the right, and the kick drum. You wouldn't really want the kick drum all the way off to the side, but you can simulate that whole kind of where it sounds.
Well,
like
and it helps when they raise the drummer up. Like, some of the bands you cover, and you see how the drummer brings his own little mini stage because he always wants to be a little higher, and you bring the bass up to like chest level of the rest of the players and the drums above, and all of a sudden it fills out the room much better.
Yep. And he'll usually play that same guy who goes up on the drum riser. He'll also have a wedge, like we have a monitor for him as well, so it's up on the drum riser with him on the floor, kind of angled up, same way that the singers have theirs out in front, because he also sings in the back.
I'm surprised he hasn't built a sound reflector to go behind him, because if I was a drummer, I'd make me a 3-board wall behind my drums, and use that sound reflecting material to just kind of turn your whole drum set into a directional speaker.
For the most part, almost everywhere we play, the drummer does have his back to a wall, just because the space is usually confined.
Oh, he does have one?
So there's not that he has one that he brings with him, but it's more that where he's positioned, there's usually a wall directly behind him.
There's a wall bouncing for him.
We build around him, kind of. But some of them, like the one that we had, that big fancy room I sent you a picture of the other day, or showed you.
Oh, that was you just had room for sound all around you.
Yeah, it was a big old stage. Like the stage itself, I'm gonna say it was probably 30 feet across by 20 feet deep, and like the drummer, where he could have just gone anywhere, but like wherever he was up on the stage, and it was about 3 feet high.
Well, and the room was designed to really like bounce sound everywhere. So
vaulted ceilings. It reminded me of an old theater in terms of the purpose being to direct sound from the stage out, almost amphitheater style, to get you can talk quietly on stage and be heard easily just about anywhere in the room, based on the acoustics of the room. So having a band up there and blasting definitely.
It's better than getting crammed into a corner in a little club.
yeah. But we go right back and forth. Like one day it'll be the corner of a little club, the next day it's the huge room, and the next time it's back in the corner of a little club. Next time it's outside on a beach. It all depends. It's all in the days. Tomorrow actually is going to be a new venue that we haven't been to before.
So new location.
We're gonna have to see about that. Yeah.
It always takes a little longer to get set up if you haven't worked there.
Yep, Mike always wants to get there a little bit early so we can, kind of together go over the strategy for hearing how the room is, and also be able to talk to management, make sure they know who we are, and we talk to them, find out if we can get started right now, if we have to wait, wait till this table clears out or whatever, and then we'll move, all kinds of different things. Because a lot of times with the restaurants, they need to be making money from the tables as much as they can, so they want to push it to the last minute, but we need time to set up, and they understand that. So if the band starts at 9, they can't move tables at 8:45 and expect sound at 9. That's not the way these things work. It's like you need to give us time to be able to put all the stuff together and get the musicians all set up.
Yeah, and you are seeing more and more, like, restaurants and places like that bring in music venues. They got to do something.
Yeah. And I mean, the people want it. I mean, that's the thing. People want to come out and party, and we want to put the party on. I mean, we've been, had several
people
years.
are ready to party now. Like this year, you should be like chock full of gigs.
Yep, exactly. Pretty much every Saturday for the rest of the year is already booked. We have a lot of Fridays booked already, occasional Thursdays and Tuesdays and whatever, random stuff here and there. But the first things that always fill up is the Saturdays. And that's where I want to say that, even a month ago, I was looking at it, and we had a little bit of a slow period, like over the holidays and into January, February, usually only a couple of gigs. And then when it starts to speed back up, though, it's like it goes from a gig or two a month, and all of a sudden it's okay every Saturday and, every other Friday. And it's like all of a sudden 10, 15 gigs a month, which is great. We end up with 150, 160 gigs a year, probably sometimes.
It's a good sign right now. Like, I want to see the music scene get back to normal. And getting some gigs and getting people to go to them. We need to see that right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a big
Otherwise,
part of it.
music is in a rut until.
Indeed. And that's the thing, is it started opening up not quite a year ago, but I guess over the summer somewhat, when things started getting nicer out. More venues were coming out. There were some of the town events. City of Linden had one where we did an event over there. And one time we did Bogota Day, another town, and where they have an event for the town where they're going to hire a band, and we come out and do the band thing for that. Some of it was multiple bands. But I think tomorrow is, like I said, a new place. I was trying to think of the name. I think it was Gentle Giant. So I was amused by the name. So
They named it after you.
they named it after me. So we'll see. I think it's only about 20 or 30 minutes north of here. So not too bad. Some of the gigs are like an hour and a half away. But in this case, it's probably 20, 30 minutes. But new place, like I said, so we're going to try to get there early, double check, see if we can get everything set up. But it's a band we've worked with a number of times, a lot of times. So no problems there.
Yeah, it's not so bad if you're familiar with the band. Even a new place, you can massage the sound real quick. New band in a new place, that's a double challenge.
Yep. Doubling it up. Always tricky.
Mike's good though. Like, I'm sure he just like snaps right into work mode and
And gets right to it. Now I do have another video here for us that's about 16 minutes long. Probably take us close to the break, right?
good timing.
Take us right up to where we'll then get to the dads at 9, and then Tony and I will be back after the dads to continue talking more.
Grooving. We will continue grooving.
Continue talking more, grooving and moving and grooving. So this one is called The Trick That Unlocked Music for Me in about 16 minutes.
Oh.
So let's see what we have here.
Well, Kiefer was showing me a new trick on how to get bras and panties thrown at you.
Well, that's a good trick to learn.
Well, yeah, I've been trying to learn it for 40 years.
This is Venus Theory. We've done a couple of his videos before. You'll recognize his voice.
Oh, yeah. Venus Theory, I do like.
Yep, and I think we got him at about 30% also. So let's see how we do here.
Nashville tag, huh?
A Morning Coffee with Cameron is brought to you in part by Free-to-Use Sounds. The Free-to-Use Sounds all-in-one bundle comes with over 1 terabyte of commercial and royalty-free recordings that you can use in your sound design, post-production, music, or any other project you see fit.
Free-to-Use
If you
Sounds
want
also
instant
caught my
access
eye with
to
this.
more sounds than you will ever conceivably need, you can use my promo code VenusTheory5 at checkout to save $5 and get the entire collection for only $20. Howdy doody, buckaroonies, and welcome back to another episode of Hey Brain, it's Wednesday and we really need a video for next week, so what you got?
Sorry, bro. Best I can do is a bunch of anxiety and a big scoop of go f yourself.
So, I apologize in advance that this video is going to be pretty off the cuff and unscripted, but that's what it is. Anyways, in this video, I want to talk about exotic scales, and more specifically dive into the idea of modal mixture, because this is probably one of the most powerful concepts when it comes to cinematic music writing and just learning to spice up your chord progressions, but it's really not that hard to do. So it's another one of those kind of fun tricks that just makes you sound like a musical genius. Of course, as usual with these types of videos, I would love for you to consider this as a homework assignment for yourself and go out and play around with it. And if you make something cool, feel free to share it with me because I love to hear what you're out there doing and what you're up to. Let's talk exotic scales. In this video, I want to break down Mixolydian Flat 6 because it's a really interesting scale that's a lot of fun. It's very colorful. It's got a lot of cool twang and twists to it, and although by most standards this is considered a pretty exotic scale, it's one of the easier ones and one of the more common ones to grasp, and I think it's going to be a good foundation to all of this. So how do we play Mixolydian Flat 6? First, we need to know our Mixolydian mode. So modes are a lot like scales. They're just sort of a different way of thinking about scales because it all interlinks, and once you understand it, it's a really easy way to sort of unlock looking at notes or the keyboard, in this case, in a bit of a different way, and it makes it easier to interpret things, sorta. To find the modes, we can work from C to B. So going on all the white keys from C to C is one mode, D to D is another mode, E to E is another mode, and so on. Our modes are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, or the one we don't talk about. This is pretty hard to remember, so the easier way to do this is I do pot, Leave Me Alone, Locrian. So going by that, I do pot, leave me, we land on G. That gives us Mixolydian. So G to G is the Mixolydian mode. Mixolydian is a pretty bright mode, but what makes it Mixolydian and not major is we have this flat 7, which I guess gives it sort of like a bluesier flair. Sick. To turn this into Mixolydian flat 6, we take the Mixolydian mode and flat the 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat, or down a half step, and we have Mixolydian flat 6, which is interesting because it starts off very bright, but then we get real twangy, but it's kind of a fun twang if you think of it. Because it's like major on the bottom, but minor on the top. And that's a really fun blend of moods. Normally, when you're working in modes, you might tend to compose with diatonic chords, or chords that exist naturally based on the notes of the scale. But with Mixolydian flat 6 and other exotic scales, things get a little bit weird. So in Mixolydian flat 6's case, we have major, then we go right into diminished, followed by, you guessed it, another diminished, followed by minor, minor, augmented, then major, major. So that's a pretty tall order if you think of it that way, but it's not that hard to use. When it comes to utilizing Mixolydian flat 6, musically speaking, my brain, I think, tends to think of it sort of like the regular old minor scale, just with a raised third. And that's exactly what Mixolydian flat 6 is.
What? We make hits.
So, with all this in mind, let's talk about, I guess, some of the things that sound cool in Mixolydian flat 6 and make it easier to use. One of the big ones is working from major 1 right up to that minor 4, because that's our Mixolydian flat 6 flavor. This flat 6 gives us minor 4. So this is a cool transition. This major 1 to minor 4 movement feels a lot like a chromatic mediant in that it comes across as very epic and superhero-y. But it's not a chromatic mediant. It's just a major 1 to minor 4, but it gives you that same sort of flair. Another fun way to utilize Mixolydian flat 6 is to sort of hide the third and not give it away right away, but sort of sneak it in there for a bit of spicy twang at the end. So you're kind of using Mixolydian flat 6 to create a Picardy third, sorta. Kind of a fun way to look at it. Similar to that, another fun thing is using the major 1 and major 7, but working in the flat 6 melodically. It gives you very Trent Reznor-y film score-y thing. Cool. Finally, I think one of the most profound sounding ways to use this is to double up big, beefy meaty, cheesy Hardy's double octaves underneath things, using the degrees from the scale, but holding something kind of simple and stable up top, like just working on sort of a loose arpeggiated thing here. Start on 1. 7. 1. Minor 6. 4. 1. Yeah. Let's go to 5. Minor 6. 5. 1. Not really doing much of anything. 7. 4. 5. 1. Very bruh. So that is kind of a quick tour of an exotic scale and a couple ways to think about it and approach it, and hopefully that's helpful. But the real meat and potatoes, I guess, of what I wanted to talk about with all this is the idea of modal mixture, or playing with different modes at the same time. This is sort of what I've talked about in a previous video, but on the concept of the mode rather than the chord. The easiest way to start experimenting with modal modulation, I think, is just to work in the minor third every once in a while, which takes us from G Mixolydian flat 6 and turns that into G minor, better known as Aeolian. So we can start working that in melodically to open up some different kind of colors and timbres, I guess, to the overall flavor of things. And by pairing diatonic chords from these two modes together, we can create more interesting progressions. Pretty neat stuff. Sticking a bit more purely to chords, we can mix these modes together to, I guess, correct some of the weirder things about Mixolydian flat 6 by borrowing some stuff from Aeolian. So we could start with our G major, work to B flat major, E major, or E flat major, sorry, and then maybe we could jump down to C major. Now we're just going regular Mixolydian, Mixolydian flat 6 going to, I don't know, the F, G major. And ta-da, we've got a really interesting, spicy twist. Doing things like this allows you to access some, I guess, pretty advanced concepts, so things like chromatic mediance or secondary dominance or all sorts of other kind of spicy tricks in music without necessarily needing to deeply understand the underlying theory behind it, because you're just sort of connecting the dots that you already know. Another particularly common variant of Mixolydian is Mixolydian flat 2, where Mixolydian flat 6 is sort of the chipper bottom end with the minor-y top end. Mixolydian flat 2 sort of exists as the opposite of that, with the minor-y spicy bottom end, but with the major-y top end. So these two flavors contrast very nicely. So with regular old Mixolydian stuff, I guess Mixo flat 6, let's do that. By working in the flat 2 and not using the 5, we get sort of a false Neapolitan second, because we're building a major off of a flattened 2. And if we sort of play this out of a minor scale with that on top, that's a really interesting combination. Really, what we're doing there is almost turning this into G Phrygian. And I've already done a video about the Phrygian mode and why it's super, super fun, but with a true Phrygian mode here, now we really get into the sort of fun stuff if we're mixing Mixolydian flat 6 with Phrygian. So that's really powerful. Okay, so at this point, it's probably worth taking a step back and just answering the question of, the fuck does all of this mean practically when making music? Because we've talked about a whole bunch of technical jargon and big words and stuff, and it may not make a whole lot of sense. So to boil this down to its essence, I guess, this stuff is a lot like chords. We have major chords, or minor chords, or sus chords, or 7 chords, or augmented chords, or whatever. There are a lot of different flavors of one chord, and modes are kind of the same way. We have one sort of flavor of something, we have another flavor, and we have variations on all of those flavors, and we can swap between them freely, and it's a really powerful thing to start playing with because it opens up the keyboard or notes or just music in general in such a broad and beautiful way, because you can freely swap between any of this at any point to sort of unstick yourself or explore into another direction. But I don't know, even more simply, I guess, it's like if you needed to paint your bathroom, and let's say you wanted to paint your bathroom blue. You don't just go to the paint store and buy blue. You look through like a trillion different swatches of all the different shades and hues of blue. And modes are a lot like that. We're painting time with different shades and hues, and that's pretty cool. All of this leads really well, I think, into using modal modulation to also change keys, because something like G Phrygian, for example, is also C Aeolian. But that's maybe a concept we can save for a future video, because I think we've had enough technical mumba humba for one sitting, and hopefully at this point you're excited enough to go out and try what we've explored thus far for yourself. So, hey, thanks for tuning into this week's TED Talk / mild mental breakdown. I apologize if this video was sort of random and all over the place, but I don't know, I'm just not really in the right headspace right now to tackle a more traditional video for the channel. I've been really busy and my mind is sort of elsewhere lately, but that's neither here nor there, and I hope you enjoyed it regardless. So with that...
And I did.
And I am excited. His ideas there on the major 1 to the minor 4, been playing around with that for the last couple weeks, and he kicked in a couple of new ideas for me.
Yep. And he kind of put a technical name to it. And of course, we're not going to have a quiz later. Don't anybody worry. No quiz later.
Just remember,
to be exposed to the concept is the important part.
I do pot, leave me alone. I can actually remember the modes now, and
then the last
Kiefer helped me to clarify it.
I do pot, leave me alone, Locrian.
Well, the Locrian, apparently, that's the bastard child of the modes.
That's the one we don't usually talk about. So we just got to remember his name and just then we don't speak his name.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious as to why that mode is kind of the the black sheep of the modes. We'll have to explore that.
Yep.
We can in a later episode.
Real briefly, we could even just look at it on your keyboard right there. If we looked at all the white keys and we looked at the first 6 chords of, we'll say in C major, right? So you got C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B.
Oh, it's the B. No wonder. Yeah, because the B, when I'm in C major, the B is the weird one.
If you were trying to play, but that's one way you can kind of cheat, because if you wanted to make a Locrian feel, B Locrian, because it's just B to B on the keyboard, because it's just like your C Ionian, it's 1 behind. So as long as you're hitting all those same notes, so that's where relating everything back to C major and A minor is my usual trick, because that way it's all the white keys. So I know that if I wanted to look at Dorian, one way I could do it is to look at just the D to the D, all the white keys, because I know that that's C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, and you work your way up like that so that you can deal with them at that point where you already know the fingering, let's say, because it's all the white keys, so it's easy enough, and then branch out to the other keys later, like doing all those different modes, not just for C major, but now go to 1 sharp, so go to G major, or go to 1 flat and you go to F major. So kind of work your way around the circle of fifths that way to kind of expand out to the more difficult fingerings and the less familiar scales.
Yeah, that's why I think.
Are we talking about music or women?
Yes,
indeed. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Sounds like you guys have been talking some IT.
Indeed, we have, and we always will.
How you doing there? You got the dads queued up?
Yeah, I do.
I figured you would.
Yes. Are you guys ready to watch the dads?
Yep.
Before we come back and talk some more IT. Wait, I said that wrong. Let me try this again. That Snickers went down good, Glenn.
Clear that.
IT.
Tyler's gonna run out of air.
With Glenn and Tony.
But she was almost like meditating that one.
Almost. We'll catch you guys after the dads.
See you in a little bit. We're letting the air out of the tires.
This has been an episode of Talkin Shhh I.T. We'll be back in a few moments with them. But first, we're going to go ahead and we're going to check out our bee's knees, our dads, with you Dad Me At Hello with the best board games. Thanks for choosing Edgified Heart and share the show.